Hello and welcome back to the Oracle Parlor podcast. My name is Jenny, aka Phantasma Witch, and I'm so excited for today's topic because this is something that is really important to me on all levels. When I say all levels, I am talking about magic as well as mundane, and that is boundaries, specifically boundaries with spirits. So, before we get into it today, I just want to add the disclaimer at the beginning that we are going to be talking about spirits, which means we are going to be talking about ghosts and death. There is going to be mention of abuse, PTSD. We're not going to get into details, but those topics are going to pop up. And then, of course, I like to mention, I think I forgot to mention this in the last spooky stories, but you don't have to believe anything that I'm talking about when it comes to ghosts. I'm simply sharing my experiences and what I have, been through and what I personally believe. It is totally up to you to use your discernment and decide what you want to decide when it comes to those topics. So, with all that being said, I think the first most important thing that we need to kind of discuss is, boundaries. What are they? This is a word that we hear, I feel like, quite a lot. And not just in the spiritual or witchy, magical, psychic community. Boundaries are a really big topic, hot topic for everyone, whether they are practicing witchy things or just the everyday psychology and therapy of it. So, I want to read you a quote, and I will have links to all of my sources in the episode description for anybody who is interested. So, this quote comes from the Council of Relationships.org, and this quote says that boundaries are the emotional, physical, and mental limits we set for ourselves in various aspects of our lives. We limit who can access our personal and emotional space when we set boundaries. They determine how much others can influence us, use our time and energy, and affect our emotions. Healthy boundaries provide a sense of security and autonomy. I think it's so important that we understand this before we get into today's topic. Because, like I said, what we're going to be discussing today is for both a personal level with the living as well as with those who have parted, spirits, entities. It doesn't even have to be, if we're talking about spirits as a whole, not just spirits of people, just entities, things that may make us uncomfortable. Boundaries are so important to have for ourselves and for others. What do I mean for ourselves? We each have our own limit to how much we can do. And it is up to us to also be able to respect our own personal boundaries. So, for example, burnout happens a lot. And not everybody has the privilege to not be burnt out, like if it comes to work. Some people have to work, 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 work. And that causes burnout. But when it comes to our own personal boundaries with things, for example, let's say you're working on a personal project just for you, just for fun. But you wake up one day and you really don't feel like working on that project and you really don't want to do that thing. Heck, we could even use the example of spell work, right? This is a witchy podcast. Let's use spell work as an example. Let's say you know that there's a full moon and you know that you could really take advantage of the energies of this full moon if you decided to sit down, do the spell work, set your intentions, use your energy, but mentally, let's say you're not in the headspace. Energetically, you feel off. Or maybe physically, you don't feel well. Your personal boundary in that moment, conscious of it or not, is, I really don't feel like doing this ritual tonight. Respecting your personal boundary would look like saying, since I don't feel physically well, feel mentally well, feel emotionally right, or energetically right, I'm going to respect my personal boundary and I'm going to put this on pause. And I know logically that I can do this same exact ritual anytime within the next 3 days. If you practice in that way of, if we're working with a moon phase, that moon phase lasts for about 3 days. Doesn't have to be done immediately. That is respecting your personal boundary by saying, you know what? I'm not going to do it. Overstepping your boundary is pushing yourself too hard and saying, okay, well, I know I don't mentally or emotionally or energetically or physically feel well, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm going to push through it. And I'm just going to do it and I'm just going to take care of it. And then you feel not great later. So boundaries also come from within and respecting ourselves as much as they apply to those outside of ourselves. And this is where we get into the idea of both with the living as well with spirits. So, as a person with PTSD who is an abuse survivor, I want to be the first person to say, emphatically say, that you are absolutely allowed to have your boundaries, especially if you are not feeling safe or you feel uncomfortable. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away from people or situations that make you feel unsafe or uncomfortable. This is applied to the living as well as spirits. And there are a lot of people who have a fear of ghosts and entities and spirits. And unfortunately, that comes from experience sometimes, or it simply comes from experience with what we've seen in media. I love a good scary movie. I love a good scary movie. I love ghost stories and even if they're not scary, but they're just fun, silly ghost movies. I love that. But I know, and I think we talked about this on the discernment episode, I know that that's not reality all the time. I know that not every ghost is going to be a demon. That's Hollywood. That's fun. That's entertainment. That is not reality. Unfortunately, though, this can instill a fear in us. It absolutely can. And I'm speaking from experience because I was scared, so scared of spirits when I was a kid. And I had experiences with spirits as a kid and different entities. Boundaries with spirits can involve tools, but they can simply just be your intent, your conviction, and your belief, whether that belief comes from a spiritual practice, a spiritual belief, or just belief in yourself, confidence in yourself. So, oftentimes as witches, we know that there are ways to kick spirits out. Some of the ways can include burning different herbs, such as rosemary, essentially any cleansing herbs. We can use those to push them out and be like, no. One of my favorite ones that I hear often in in Mexican traditions, in brujeria, is literally curse them out. Shout at them, curse them out, and be like, nah, get the F out of here. I don't want your. I'm trying not to cuss on my podcast. You get the idea, though. There are many different ways as witches. If you are somebody who identifies and practices, there are many different ways we can uphold our boundaries with spirits. But all of that still requires the intent, the confidence, and the belief. And again, that belief can stem from either a higher source or simply within you. When I've had spirits that I've interacted with that have made me felt uncomfortable, I have absolute confidence in myself that I know I can tell that spirit, get the hell out of here. You can't be here. Or, no, I don't think so. You need to go. It's very similar to if you have somebody in your face, you can choose to walk away from that. Now, I do want to say that there is this belief that most spirits must follow the rules that are set by people on the physical plane. And I do believe that this can definitely be the case. You can set these rules, you can set these boundaries, and you would be surprised at how often spirits listen to that. But sometimes they don't listen, right? Sometimes they are a bit pushy. And of course, there are some spirits that may require a little more push when it comes to shove, which is why I brought up the herbs, the different witchy tactics of literally pushing them out the door. If we were to put this in the context of the living, let's say a person walks into your home that is completely uninvited. Somebody that you personally know, let's say, that you don't like, you know this person's a problem, and they walk up to your door and they try to push their way into your door. You wouldn't just stand back and be like, oh no, I guess they're inside my house yelling at me, being rude. There's nothing I can do about it. No, they're on your property. they're in your they're in your living space. They're you can push them back out the door before they can get in. But of course, like I said, this is a very balanced, sensitive topic because yeah, sometimes that person may overpower you. That doesn't mean you can't call people for backup. You can't call, you can call up your friends and be like, "Hey, this person's in my house. I need you to come get them." "Hey, this person's not listening to me." It's the same thing with spirits. Sometimes you may have to call backup, but that doesn't mean you should be afraid. As I always like to quote the New Kirks, curiosity over fear, right? Be curious, but at the same time, don't take BS. Another quote that I really like is do no harm, take no BS. Don't take other people's or spirits uncomfortable pushing, nagging that there's a line, right? So, I want to share with you a story where I actually had this happen with a spirit. There is a local park not too far from where I live. And at this local park, me and my partner in the spring and summer would often go and hang out just to get some sunshine, just lay on the grass and relax. And one time, me and my partner had gone, and I decided I was going to spend some time meditating. So I sat down in the grass and I closed my eyes and I began to get into my space, my zone, the flow of meditation. I'm releasing thought, I'm getting into that flow state. And then I sense a spirit. And I see in my mind's eye this Victorian man. Yes, I know, the stereotype of the Victorian spirit. But hear me out. I see this Victorian man, and I say Victorian. I don't think he was Victorian. I think it may have been later than that. I'm not good with dates. But he had approached me, and the energy he gave off was kind of impatient. And so I was like, oh, well, this is strange. I've not had this happen before, where a spirit came up to me, and I decided to approach it with curiosity. And I was like, hi. And before I could really project this thought of like, okay, hi, who are you? As I was still trying to process this, this spirit of this man says very sternly to me, I want to talk. And I was like, okay, that's a little intense. And so I was like, okay, um, if we're gonna talk, I have some rules. If we have a conversation, you can't follow me home. You can't follow me out of the park. I don't give you permission to um, come back with me. And you have to respect my personal boundaries. So if I tell you no, uh, you're going to have to walk away. And I didn't even really finish giving this spirit my like rules of like, okay, I'm open to a conversation, but like here's what I expect. Um, he kind of rudely cut me off and very curtly said, I want to talk. And the energy and the vibe was that because I'm I identify as a woman, I'm very femme presenting as well. He did not respect me. He actually thought it was like the energy, because again, when communicating with spirits, when communicating with entities and energy, it's not always super straightforward. It's not like I'm literally being told something or hearing something. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's literally just getting the feelings, the emotions, the vibe, I guess you could say. And so as this spirit was talking to me, the vibe was he did not respect me because I was a woman. He did not respect me because he thought he didn't have to or didn't need to, because he thought it was silly and I was overreacting as a woman who was faint of heart. You know, all of these old, very old, harmful stereotype ideas. That was the vibe he gave after I had given him my set of rules. And I said, sir, if you cannot respect me, if you cannot listen to my set of rules, if you cannot tell me that you ensure that you're not going to stalk me essentially and follow me, then we cannot have this conversation. And he got so mad. His whole body language was already very rigid, but it was like he got very pouty. And when I say mad, I don't mean like, ooh, an angry spirit who's going to lash out. I meant like mad like a toddler, mad like a child when they're having a tantrum because they don't get what they want. He was not happy that I was telling him no because he would not respect my boundaries, because he did not want to respect my boundaries. So I told him, we can't have this conversation if you're going to act this way. Goodbye. And I closed the communication. I put up a boundary. So when I put up this boundary, it's literally telling the spirit, no, you're not allowed to speak to me while I'm here. You're not allowed to interact with me while I'm here. You may not approach me while I'm here. It's setting this intention within my energy and thinking it. That's putting up the boundary with spirit. That's telling them no. And this is what I mean by you'll be surprised at how often spirits have to kind of follow those rules. It's interesting. Of course, like I said, it depends, caveat, it depends on every situation. It changes every situation. But when it comes to these like everyday wandering spirits or entities that you may come across, even parasitic entities, like these little frustrating, annoying like bugs, which we will talk about that in another episode. But if you just tell them no, go the hell away, they usually will. And that's exactly what happened with this Victorian spirit. As soon as I told him, you can't talk to me like that. I don't appreciate you talking to me like that. And if you aren't going to respect me, then we're not going to talk. And as soon as I said that, and I put up this boundary and this energetic, you can't approach me, you can't talk to me, you can't interact with me, I was able to sit in meditation the entire time without this spirit approaching me again. I had no issues with him. He didn't come back. He didn't try to interact with me, nothing. And I was like, fantastic, wonderful. And then I would say a few weeks, maybe a month or so went by. I'm not exactly sure because it's been a while. It's been a couple years. But I had sat with this for a while. And me and my partner went back to this park and we're sitting in the grass again. And it's funny because when I first arrived back at the park, I just knew, I just knew one of those clear senses, just knowing, clear knowing. I just knew that that spirit was there and that he knew I was there. I knew he knew I knew, but he couldn't interact with me. But I felt that. So I tried again, curiosity, openness, in a way of like, let's see, right? I wanted to see if he was more willing to respect those boundaries. So when I sat down with my partner to meditate, I told this spirit, since I knew he knew I was there, I said, all right, if you want to talk, if you want to have a conversation and tell me what it is that you need or want or whatever it is that you're trying to say, if you want to do that now, you may do so only if you are willing to follow those boundaries I set, only if you are willing to respect me and not follow me and not do XYZ things and whatever that the list was that I gave. And he appeared before me again in my mind's eye. I saw him there exactly as before, wearing a nice suit, hair slicked back, and he had his arms crossed and he was still pouting. But he was like, fine, fine, I'll do it. I'll respect you. Very much like he obviously didn't want to. But what he wanted to say, what he wanted to ask, he decided was way more important than putting up a fight with someone. He was willing to listen to me. He was willing to respect my boundaries because he had decided after he sat on it, literally like putting a child on timeout. After sitting with it, he decided, what I need is more important than me, not respecting this person and yada, yada, yada. And so he finally said he would listen and respect that. And he told me what it was that he wanted to say. So, since I'm here telling this story, I will continue to finish telling this story before we get back into boundaries. And all he wanted to do was tell me about how he was unhappy about the situation he was in. So for context, this park, you may be wondering, why is the spirit of this why is the spirit of this Victorian man at a local park? This park actually has an old home, a very old home that was taken from a different area of town and relocated at the park. And again, I want to say it's Victorian era, and I know it's not exactly Victorian. It's a few years off. So again, excuse my dates. But this old home had been relocated onto this property and it was used for like weddings and things like that. And what he had told me was nothing is the same. Everything's different. And then he showed me the house that was on the park property. And he was showing me that the decor in the house, specifically, it was the decor. The decor in the house, the way that the house was set up, the rooms and the furniture pieces were all different and not where they should be and not how it should be and not what he wanted it to be. And he was very displeased about it. And when he told me this, through these visuals, through these different ways, and we can talk about this in another episode on how spirit communicates, how um, we psychically receive information in different ways. So we can do that in another episode if y'all would like that. But when he had explained this to me and shown this to me, I told him like, "Hey, I'm sorry. That sucks. Um, I'm not sure what, why you're telling me this." And he said, "Well, you can hear me, and I need you to tell them that they need to change it." And he was referring to the people who were running the property. And I had to explain to him, I have no affiliation with these people. These people do their own thing. They have it set up for a reason. I even tried telling him that there's a very, 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 very high chance that everything he knew the home to be previously, those items, those pieces of furniture, everything probably doesn't exist anymore. Because one of the things that tends to happen with a lot of these like historic properties and historic homes is the chances of the furniture or the material goods that are in the actual historic home are not the same as what they were when it used to, be in its prime back in the day, back when it was original. And so I had to kind of gently explain to him, like, sir, I have no control over that. I don't even know who I would talk to about that. And chances are everything you knew it to be is gone now because they had to relocate it. There's a reason why it's different now. There's a reason for that. And he was not happy that I told him that. And I was like, I would love to help you, but this is completely out of my control. And I try to gently just kind of explain to him, like, you know, that it was a good thing that the house was still around. That he should be thankful that the house is still around. Not like, yeah, you should be thankful, but just like, hey, be grateful the house is still here. Be grateful that the house is in a beautiful location and people appreciate it and people take photos of it. Like it's beautiful. It just may not be what you remember it as beautiful to be, but it still is beautiful and it still has wonderful qualities. But he was just like so not hearing it anymore. And so he kind of stormed off, and that was kind of the end of our conversation. So, all this to say, boundaries are very, very important, even when it comes to spirits. But now, the story doesn't end there. As a matter of fact, I actually shared this story in not so many words on TikTok. So, uh, as some of you may know, um, I share a lot of my paranormal experiences on TikTok, or I used to. I used to do it all the time. It was my favorite thing to do. And back when they had said that the TikTok ban was going to happen, I decided to start uploading all of my stories and videos and everything to YouTube. And so I have since stopped because of a lot of reasons. However, I got a comment by someone on the first part of the video. So it was a two-part video. And in the first part of the video, I was talking about how this Victorian man approached me, was extremely rude, did not want to listen to me, did not want to respect me, did not want to respect my boundaries, and how I literally had to tell him, then get out. Like, I'm not going to talk to you. So this person commented on my video on YouTube. And the first thing they did was they were excusing the spirit's behavior by saying, well, he was from a different time period where these things would have been okay. If you're not watching the video, I just lean back in disbelief. So, I want you to take that same idea and apply it to the living. It's okay that that person said something highly inappropriate because they're from a different time period. It's okay that that person completely disrespected someone because they're from a different time period. It's okay that that person is ignorant, racist, homophobic, fill in the blank because they're from a different time period. Do you see the problem there? That was the first thing they had mentioned. Ironically, this person had also said within the same comment that they were born, and this was, they said it, I hadn't even commented anything. They had openly said that they were born, I think they said, oh my gosh, I want to say the late 70s. They had said they were born decades before me, essentially, is what they were trying to say, and that they just don't understand this generation and how they can't. So I was like, okay, so already, if we're pathologizing, already this person is taking it very personally, which was a number one red flag because they're projecting, right? The response that I had in regards to this point that they made was exactly what I'm going to tell you. People, spirits, do not get a pass for their inappropriate, rude behavior, whatever kind of unexceptionally inappropriate behavior it may be. They do not get a pass for it simply because they're from a different time period. And I even told this person in this comment, I specifically told this spirit that that was not okay. and that they should and needed to respect me. And just because they weren't willing to do so because I'm a woman, no. I'm shaking my head. No. This spirit, this specific spirit, using this specific situation still has to learn that lesson. If they're going to be hanging around as a spirit for whatever reason, whether they choose to, whether they're forced to, the point is, no matter what that reason may be, unknowable reason, they still need to learn that this is not okay. And guess what? I told that spirit what the boundary was. I told them that that was not okay. And guess what? They listened. They weren't happy about it. They didn't want to respect the boundary, but they did because they learned real quick that that kind of behavior was not going to be tolerated. Not at all. So, the other thing that this person had made a comment of after I had explained to them, spirits don't get a pass because they're from a different time period, yada, yada. I explained this to them as gently as I could, as kindly as I could. They responded, this person in the comments responded that my behavior, they said, well, I agree that, people are allowed to have boundaries. And I agree, that people are allowed to say no if they're uncomfortable. But what you did is narcissistic behavior. At that point, I stopped conversing with this person because it's obvious that they, one, did not know what they were talking about, and two, the conversation, they weren't willing to have a conversation. So at that point, I stepped away. But I wanted to still talk about this because this is an idea, a misconception that a lot of people have about boundaries. Either you're someone who comes from abuse, like me, and it's ingrained in you that to have boundaries is to be selfish, which is not healthy. Or you are the narcissist, and other people having boundaries makes you uncomfortable, right? Two ends of the spectrum here. And it is a spectrum. There's a lot of in between. But the point is that if you're not the person who comes from abuse, who's thinking, if I say no, if I hold a boundary, then I am somehow being selfish and I need to be more selfless, then the work is to be done within, right? Of how can we get that confidence? Again, we're speaking about both the living and the deceased. How can I be able to know that I'm allowed to say no, that it's okay for me to say, hey, you can't talk to me that way. Hey, I don't appreciate that. Hey, you hurt my feelings. Please don't do that again. And if you do, I'm not going to talk to you next time. I'm not going to sit here with you because you're not willing to have a conversation or whatever the situation may be. So I also want to talk about the idea of a narcissist because this person had said, "Oh, well, what you're doing is narcissistic behavior." Well, let's take a look. What does that mean? We know what a narcissist is, but do we really? So let's break that down because this person kind of threw the term out there and obviously didn't know. So this comes from mayoclinic.org, from diseases conditions section of the website. And again, I'll link this in the show notes. So they say a narcissist is a person with a mental health disorder in which the person has an unreasonably high sense of self-importance who use manipulation, emotional exploitation, with a lack of empathy or patronizing actions against others. That is the literal definition, explanation of who a narcissist is and what a narcissist does. So I want you to take that in and I want you to recognize that saying no for your personal safety, for your personal well-being, holding a boundary because you feel unsafe or uncomfortable is not the same as manipulation or emotional exploitation, lacking empathy or patronizing. That is not the same. There is a difference between I'm going to withhold myself from you because I'm punishing you intentionally. I am doing this to hurt you because I'm mad at you. That is emotional abuse, emotional exploitation, and manipulation. Yes. But saying, I'm not going to speak to you because you are not listening to me. You're not willing to have a conversation with me. You're not respecting me. I'm telling you I don't feel comfortable with these things. And instead of respecting that, you want to keep pushing. I'm going to say no. There's a major difference there. You're allowed to tell spirits, to tell people, no. I have another story, just a quick one, where one time I was at my altar in my old place, not the place I'm in now. At my last apartment, I had a lot of spirit activity in that place, a lot. And one of the reasons why I feel like I had so much spirit activity in my last apartment is because it was a very old apartment and it was literally right up against the river. Of course, this is LA, so it's a cemented river, so it's not very pretty. And it was in back alley. But if you know anything about spirits and energy, rivers are very much an energy conductor. And we can get into this in another time, maybe in a spooky stories about that specific apartment. I think that's a good idea. So, in this old apartment, I was at my altar. I was lighting some incense and I was closing my eyes and I was getting into that open flow state. And as soon as I closed my eyes, an older, like an old woman with like white hair and wrinkles, she must have been like 70 to 80 years old, rushed my face and was shouting at me. And her energy was so intense, and it was so shocking that it was as if someone had run up to me physically. That was the energy, like this rushing sensation, that it shocked me, shocked my eyes open, shocked my body, my system. It jolted me physically. That's how intense she came across. And I thought, well, that was just me. That's so weird. That was just me, right? Like you know, I'm unfortunately the type of person that needs external validation when I have experiences. And so when this happened, I was like, that was weird. Oh well. And again, I close my eyes and get back to center. And as soon as I do, she's there shouting at me. And I said, okay, hold on, this isn't just me. And so I said out loud. So when you set these boundaries, you can set it in your mind with the energetic intention, or you can speak it into existence out loud. So I decided to say out loud, hey, I don't know why you're in my apartment, and I don't know why you're yelling at me, but you're not allowed to be in here. Like this is my bedroom. This is my private space. You need to leave. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're here. But please stop screaming at me. You can't yell at me. I specifically said, I should say, I didn't say please leave specifically. So this is where we get into potato potato. I specifically told this spirit, you can't speak to me like that. You can't be yelling at me. You can't talk to me that way. I closed my eyes. She was still there. Still this very intense energy. However, this time her mouth was moving and open and yelling and shouting, and I couldn't hear anything. So she took it extremely literally when I told her, you can't talk to me or speak to me that way. You can't be yelling at me. She was like, okay, fine. I'm still gonna be here. I'm still gonna be in your face and angry. So that's at that point, I told her, okay, when I said you can't talk to me, I mean, you can't be in my bedroom. Like, you need to go, ma'am. This isn't a Wendy's. You don't get it your way. You need to go. Um, In this situation, I was not willing to tolerate having a spirit in my living quarters because I had things in place to try to prevent that. And that was the red flag that I needed to update my shields and wards. But when it comes to situations like that, there are some boundaries that I personally have. That's a no-go. If a spirit is in my bedroom and is yelling at me, that's an absolute no-go. I'm sorry. If that spirit wants to talk to me later, they can find me outside when I leave my when I leave my house, but they can't come into my personal bedroom, my private bedroom and start yelling at me. That's my personal boundary. Other people may be different, but that's mine. And I'm allowed to have that. Going back to this person who had said that it was a narcissistic behavior, which it wasn't, as we now know. There was one last thing I wanted to say. One of the things that came up as I was looking up narcissists was everything was talking about how, ironically, it's usually the narcissist who has the most issue with other people holding boundaries. And this was what happened with that Victorian man that I encountered. He was not willing to listen to me and respect my boundaries. Am I saying he's a narcissist? I don't know. He had that again, he had that childlike temperament, the angry toddler temperament. Um, Fussy and mad and, but all in all, it's really important to note that just because you can sense spirits, entities, it absolutely does not mean that you have to tolerate spirits and entities, especially when they're crossing the line. It does not mean that you even have to acknowledge or talk to them. My partner is the perfect example of this. My partner has had experiences with spirits and entities since they were a child, just like me. Except that's not something my partner wants. That's not something my partner wants to do or have to deal with every day. It's not something my partner wants to do as a career or a job. Just because you have experiences, it doesn't mean you have to quit your job and become a full-time medium. I did, but that's me. I'm a weirdo. And if you're a weirdo too, then welcome. And if you don't want to do that, then also welcome. Welcome to the parlor. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do anything you don't feel comfortable or safe doing. I was not comfortable and I did not feel safe communicating with spirits when I was a kid. Much later in life, much later in life, I finally got the courage to start looking at spirits with curiosity and without fear. And that's no shame to people who have decided, it's really freaky for me. I just cannot. That's your boundary. Respect it. You don't have to listen to me and go, oh, maybe I should really start being curious and not being fearful, and I really should just talk to spirits. Not if you don't want to. Not if you don't feel comfortable to. And never push yourself beyond your limits. Never push yourself beyond that boundary if you don't feel called to do it. If you don't feel like that's your thing, then beautiful. That's not your thing. That's your line. Better to respect your boundary than force yourself to do something you don't want to do. There's this interesting idea in some spiritual communities that if you can sense spirits, if you can see them, if you can sense them, if you can communicate in some way, then you have to do the work. You have to give the message. You don't. You can have boundaries. You can say, no, that's not for me. You may experience them from time to time and go, ooh, no, thank you. No, you know, maybe you're open to just seeing them from time to time, being like, "Ooh, that was freaky," but you don't want to be a medium. Cool, that's fine. So, let me see if there's any last things that I want to say because we're coming up to the end of the episode, and I have to make sure I don't go over time because I could keep talking. But we can definitely talk more in another episode about communicating with spirits, how you communicate with spirits. I would love to have a guest. I have a friend who's a medium as well, and we could talk for 2 to 3 hours, all day long, honestly. We can talk about this more. But for this episode, definitely take it to heart when I say that you're allowed to have boundaries with spirits. You're allowed to have boundaries for yourself, and with other people. The last thing I will say in this episode to end is my abusive father passed away a few years ago, and he passed away literally a week before I started my advanced mediumship classes. I had already taken a mediumship course, but I was taking more advanced classes. And he had passed away literally the week before I started. And I knew that this person, my father was going to try to come through in the sessions, in the practice sessions in this mediumship class. And when he was alive, I had boundaries with him. There were times I wouldn't answer his phone call. There were times where he would get manipulative and emotionally abusive, and I would tell him, we're not going to have this conversation because you're not willing to respect me or listen to me. And so we didn't. And I held those boundaries with him when he was alive. And so when it came time to start my classes, I put the energetic intent into it before I started. I told him, I said, you are not allowed to come through these sessions. I'm still upholding these boundaries with you. I don't want you to come through. I don't want to have these conversations with you. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't feel comfortable with you coming through right now. I don't feel safe with you coming through. I don't want to hear what you have to say right now. That's not to say that my boundaries won't change. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. Boundaries can change. You may not feel comfortable like me. I didn't feel comfortable with communicating, with experiencing spirits at all when I was a kid. And then those boundaries changed, and now I'm much more flexible. My boundaries 2 years ago with spirits is much different than today. For example, if I had this screaming woman in my current place, I may try to talk her down before telling her just get the hell out. It depends on the situation and my emotional state and a lot of things, right? But boundaries are allowed to change. You're allowed to change your boundaries. So when my father had just passed and I was still processing my trauma and his death and the complexity behind all that, I straight up was like, I can't, I cannot I am not emotionally or mentally, energetically, spiritually, everything. I am not prepared for that spirit to come through these sessions. And he didn't. He tried. I just have to be very clear. He did try multiple times. And I had to be like, you need to stop. You need to sit down, sir. You need to put your hand down, stop calling. I will talk to you when I'm ready to talk to you. And I did eventually. Personal things. But whether it's extremely personal with a spirit or not at all, and extremely random, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to have that boundary, and that's allowed to change depending on where you are in life. Never let anybody tell you that you're being selfish for not wanting to speak or communicate with spirits if you can. Never let anybody tell you that you are being selfish for telling other people or spirits no. Never let anybody make you feel like your boundaries are inappropriate or not allowed because it's not true. It really isn't. So, my friends, thank you for joining me in the parlor today. I hope that you had a nice little cup of tea with you and that you got to cozy up and listen to me ramble on about boundaries. If you want to listen to me ramble on more, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, make sure to leave a review. It really helps me out. Rate the show. If you want to learn more from me, you want more content from me, definitely check out my Patreon. My Patreon is both free as well as paid membership. The free content is open to everybody, and there are things such as tarot quick pulls where I do extremely discounted three card pulls one day out of the month for anybody who wants to donate money. They get a quick card pull. That's one example. Another thing that we do is Tarot Scopes Live, which do happen here on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. But they also happen on my Patreon as well, in which I pull a single tarot card for each of the zodiac signs for the month ahead. We do that at the end of every month, the last week of the month. For paid members, you get access to a Discord community. On that Discord community, we talk about psychic practices, witchy practices, divination techniques. There's even practice pairings for some of the higher memberships, higher paid memberships. Let's see what else is there. There's Q&As. Those Q&As get answered sometimes on the live. I may start doing it here as well. Which leads me to if you have a question that you would like answered on the podcast, you can absolutely send an email to oracleparlorpod@gmail.com. So, any questions related to any of the topics that we've discussed, or maybe you want to share a personal story that relates to one of the topics, one of the episodes, and you want to just share that with me, share that with people to be read on the podcast, I would love to share that. You can also book a reading with me directly, whether you want to book a pet communication session, a palm reading, a tarot reading, or maybe a psychic consultation, an intuitive consultation. You can do all that at my website, phantasmawitch.com. That's FANTASMAWITCH.com. You can find all these links in the episode description as well. If you're not watching this on YouTube, like I've mentioned multiple times, you can definitely follow me on YouTube. You can also follow me on Blue Sky for my random thoughts, random, um, witchy, comedic, venting posts. That's where you can find all that. At the moment, am still posting to Instagram and TikTok. I don't know if that will change by the time this episode comes out, but please note that I am pulling away from Instagram, especially, and moving that all to Patreon. So definitely make sure you jump on the Patreon to get all the fun stuff there. And with that, again, I thank you all for joining me on this magical little journey, for coming into my Oracle parlor, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.